The scream tore through the forest before the sun had even risen. Elena bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding against her ribs, sweat clinging to her skin. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones, in the ache that ran through her chest like a warning bell only she could hear. Outside her window, the pack grounds of Crimson Moon stretched in silver moonlight, quiet and still, but the stillness felt wrong. Too quiet, too careful, like the whole forest was holding its breath. She threw off the blankets and reached for the other side of the bed. Empty, cold. Damien had not come home again. Elena pressed her palm against the sheets, searching for any lingering warmth, and found none. This was the fourth night in a row. 4 nights her mate, the alpha king of the most powerful pack in the region, had vanished into the darkness without a word, without an explanation, without so much as a glance in her direction before disappearing. She told herself it was pack business, border patrols, trade negotiations with the neighboring territories. She told herself many things over the past few weeks, each excuse a little thinner than the last, each one wearing away at the foundation of trust she had built her entire life upon. 6 years ago, Elena had been nothing more than a quiet girl from a small, unranked family, someone the elite wolves of Crimson Moon barely noticed. Then Damien, the strongest alpha to ever lead their pack, had looked at her across a crowded gathering hall, and everything had changed. Their eyes met, and something ancient and undeniable sparked between them. The mate bond. Rare, powerful, and impossible to fake. He had crossed the entire hall that night, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the daughters of high-ranking wolves who had spent years trying to catch his attention, and knelt in front of Elena as if she were the only person in the room. From that moment forward, she was his, and he was hers, bound by something deeper than blood or rank. Their bond had become legend within the pack. Elders spoke of it with reverence, calling it a blessing rarely seen even once in a generation. Elena had been crowned Luna within the year, and for a long time, life had felt like a dream too beautiful to be real. But dreams end, and Elena was beginning to understand that hers might be ending now. She rose from the bed and wrapped a robe around her shoulders, walking to the window that overlooked the training grounds below. In the pale light of dawn, she saw a figure moving quickly between the trees at the edge of the property. Her heart clenched. She would know that stride anywhere. Damien. But he was not alone. A second shape moved beside him, smaller, quicker, wrapped in a dark cloak that did little to hide the confident sway of her hips. Elena's stomach twisted into a knot so tight it stole the breath from her lungs. She recognized that walk too. Seraphine. Seraphine, the daughter of the pack's most influential beta family, had never bothered to hide her jealousy of Elena's position. For years, she had circled the edges of the royal court like a hawk, waiting for the smallest opportunity, offering sharp smiles and sharper words whenever Elena's back was turned. Elena had always brushed it off as harmless rivalry, the kind that existed in every pack. A woman who wanted what she could not have, but would never actually act against the natural order of a mate bond. Now, watching Damien walk closely beside Seraphine in the gray light before sunrise, Elena was no longer certain of anything. She told herself there was an explanation. There had to be. Perhaps Seraphine's family had information about a threat near the border. Perhaps this was simply strategy, nothing more. Elena repeated these thoughts to herself as she dressed for the day, brushed her hair, and prepared to greet the pack as their Luna, smiling despite the storm building quietly beneath her ribs. By mid-morning, she found herself walking through the long stone corridors of the pack estate, greeting warriors and healers and young pups who looked up at her with wide, adoring eyes. Being Luna meant carrying the emotional weight of an entire pack, listening to every worry, settling every small dispute, offering comfort to every trembling heart. Elena had always loved this role, had poured herself into it completely, believing that a strong Luna made a stronger pack. But today, her mind kept drifting back to the image of Damien and Seraphine disappearing into the tree line together. She found Marcus, Damien's second-in-command and oldest friend, standing near the training yard, overseeing a group of young warriors sparring in the morning sun. Marcus had always been kind to her, steady and loyal, someone she trusted almost as much as she trusted her own mate. "Marcus," she called, approaching him with a carefully composed expression. "Have you seen Damien this morning?" Something flickered across Marcus's face before he could hide it. It was brief, barely a shift in his jaw. But Elena had spent years learning to read the subtle language of wolves, and she recognized discomfort when she saw it. "He mentioned something about border patrols," Marcus said carefully, his eyes sliding away from hers. "I haven't seen him since last night." "Border patrols," Elena repeated slowly. "With Seraphine?" Marcus's silence answered the question more clearly than words ever could. "Elena," he began, his voice gentler now, almost pleading, "I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. Damien loves you. Everyone knows the strength of your bond." "Then why can't you look me in the eye when you say that?" she asked quietly. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly torn between loyalty to his alpha and honesty toward the woman who had always treated him like family. In the end, he said nothing more, simply excused himself and walked away, leaving Elena standing alone in the training yard, with a growing sense of dread pooling in her stomach. She spent the rest of the day trying to distract herself, meeting with the pack healer to discuss the upcoming harvest festival, checking in on the youngest pups in the nursery, reviewing reports from the eastern watchtowers. Every task felt hollow, every conversation background noise beneath the loud, persistent whisper in her mind, asking the same question over and over. Where is he? Where has he been? Why does everyone look away when I ask? By evening, Damien finally returned to the estate, striding through the front hall, with the easy confidence of a man who ruled every room he entered. Elena met him at the top of the staircase, arms crossed, doing her best to keep her voice level. "You were gone all night," she said. Again, Damien's expression tightened, just slightly, the way it always did when he felt cornered. "Pack business, Elena. I don't have time to explain every hour of my day." "I'm not asking for every hour," she replied, stepping closer. "I'm asking about last night, and the night before that, and the one before that. Are you accusing me of something?" His voice carried a warning edge now, the tone of an alpha, unused to being questioned. Elena felt her throat tighten, but she refused to back down. "I saw you this morning, with Seraphine, walking through the eastern forest before sunrise." For a moment, something flickered in Damien's eyes, something that looked almost like guilt before it hardened into cold irritation. "Seraphine's family reported unusual activity near the border. I was investigating a potential threat, that is all." "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because I don't answer to you for every decision I make as alpha," he snapped, his voice sharper than she had ever heard it directed at her. The words landed like a slap, and Elena took an involuntary step back, stunned by the coldness in his tone. Seeing her expression, something in Damien seemed to soften, just slightly. He reached for her hand, but Elena pulled away before he could take it. "I used to believe there was nothing you would ever hide from me," she said quietly. "I'm starting to wonder if that was ever true." Damien's jaw tightened, and for a long moment, he said nothing at all. Then he turned and walked toward his study, leaving Elena standing alone in the hallway, with her heart cracking quietly in her chest. That night, sleep refused to come. Elena lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, replaying every strange moment of the past few weeks, the late nights, the distracted conversations, the way Damien's eyes sometimes seemed to look through her, rather than at her, as though his mind was somewhere else entirely. She thought about their wedding day, the way he had promised in front of the entire pack that nothing would ever come between them. She thought about the nights he used to stay awake just to watch her sleep, claiming he never wanted to miss a single moment with her. She thought about the mate bond itself, that rare and sacred connection that was supposed to be unbreakable, supposed to guarantee a love so deep that betrayal should have been impossible. And yet here she was, lying awake at midnight, wondering if the man she loved more than her own life had begun slipping away from her, one secret at a time. Somewhere deep in the forest beyond the estate walls, a wolf howled into the night, long and mournful, as if it too could feel the quiet unraveling happening within the walls of Crimson Moon. Elena closed her eyes and tried to push the fear away, tried to hold on to the belief that whatever strange distance had grown between her and Damien could still be mended. But a small, quiet part of her, the part connected to her wolf, the part that had never once been wrong about anything important, whispered a different truth entirely. Something has already changed, and there may be no going back. The knock on Elena's door came just before dawn, sharp and urgent. 3 quick raps that made her sit up instantly, every nerve in her body on alert. She opened it to find Grace, one of the younger healers from the pack infirmary, standing in the hallway with a lantern trembling slightly in her hand. "My Luna," Grace said, her voice hushed, glancing over her shoulder as though afraid of being overheard. "I need to speak with you. Privately." Elena stepped aside and let her in, closing the door softly behind them. Something in Grace's expression, the tightness around her eyes, the way she wrung her hands together, told Elena this was not a matter of pack healing. "What is it?" Elena asked. Grace hesitated, clearly wrestling with whether to speak at all. Finally she took a breath and let the words spill out. "I was in the eastern wing last night, restocking herbs for the healer's cabinet. I heard voices near the private meeting chamber. Alpha Damien's voice, and Seraphine's." Elena's chest tightened, but she kept her face composed. "What did you hear?" "I didn't mean to listen," Grace said quickly, guilt flashing across her face. "But I couldn't help it. Seraphine was speaking about the border patrols being a lie, something about needing more time before anyone found out. And Alpha Damien didn't deny it. He just told her to be careful, that they needed to keep things quiet a little longer." The words landed like ice water down Elena's spine. She had suspected, of course, had felt the wrongness of it for weeks now, but hearing it confirmed by someone else's ears made the truth impossible to push aside any longer. "Thank you for telling me," Elena said quietly, though her voice felt distant, even to her own ears, as if she were speaking from somewhere far outside her own body. "You didn't have to." "I couldn't stay silent," Grace whispered. "Not when it concerns you, my Luna. You have always been kind to everyone in this pack. You deserve the truth." After Grace left, Elena sat alone in the darkness of her room, staring at her hands, trying to steady the storm rising inside her chest. Part of her wanted to march straight to Damien's study and demand answers immediately. Another part of her, quieter and more fearful, wanted to pretend she had never heard any of it at all, to preserve just a little longer the fragile illusion that her marriage was still whole. In the end, her wolf made the decision for her. The instinct to know the truth, however painful, outweighed the comfort of ignorance. She waited until the following evening, when Damien returned from another long day of supposed border inspections, his expression distracted, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion that Elena now understood had nothing to do with patrolling territory lines. "We need to talk," she said, standing in the doorway of his study, arms crossed, to keep her hands from shaking. Damien looked up from the papers scattered across his desk, something wary flickering behind his eyes. "Elena, I have reports to finish." "This can't wait." She stepped further into the room, closing the door behind her. "I know about the meetings, the private ones, with Seraphine." For the first time since the suspicion had taken root in her mind, Elena watched Damien's composure crack completely. His jaw tightened, his eyes darted briefly toward the window, and for a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing at all. "It's not what you think," he finally said, though his voice lacked the conviction it once carried so effortlessly. "Then tell me what it is," Elena said, her voice trembling now despite her effort to remain calm. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my mate has been lying to me for weeks." Damien rose from his desk, running a hand through his hair, pacing toward the window, before turning back to face her. "Seraphine's family has information about a rival pack encroaching on our northern borders. It's sensitive. I couldn't risk the information spreading before we understood the full threat. And that required secret meetings, late at night, alone?" Elena's voice rose despite herself. "Damien, I am your Luna, your mate. If there was truly a threat to this pack, why would you hide it from me of all people?" Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Elena searched his face for any sign of the man she had fallen in love with, the man who used to tell her everything, who used to say she was the only person in this world he trusted completely. She found only guilt, buried beneath layers of practiced authority. "I didn't want to worry you," Damien finally said, though even to Elena's ears, the excuse sounded thin and rehearsed. "You didn't want to worry me," she repeated slowly, "or you didn't want me to know the truth." He didn't answer. That silence told Elena everything the whispered confirmation Grace had brought her the night before could not fully explain. Whatever was happening between Damien and Seraphine, it was no longer just about border patrols or pack security. Something deeper, something far more personal, had taken root, and Elena could feel the mate bond between herself and Damien growing thinner with every passing day, stretched taut by distance and distrust, until it felt as though it might snap entirely. "I want the truth," Elena said, her voice steadier now, fortified by anger rather than fear. "All of it, right now." Damien's shoulders sagged, and for a moment, Elena thought he might finally confess everything, might finally tear away the careful walls he had built around whatever secret he was protecting. Instead, his expression hardened again, the mask of the Alpha King sliding firmly back into place. "There is nothing more to say," he said coldly. "I am handling pack matters as I see fit. That is my right as Alpha." "And what about your responsibility as my mate?" Elena shot back, refusing to let him retreat behind rank and authority. "Does that mean nothing to you anymore?" Something flickered across his face, quick and painful, gone before Elena could fully read it. "Don't push this further, Elena," he said quietly. "Please." The plea in his voice should have comforted her. Instead, it terrified her more than any confession could have, because it confirmed what she already feared. There was something to hide, something significant enough that even now, cornered and confronted, Damien would rather retreat into silence than tell her the truth. Elena left his study without another word, her legs carrying her through the quiet corridors of the estate, as her mind spun with unanswered questions. She walked until she reached the private garden at the rear of the property, a place she had always found peace among the flowering trees and quiet fountains, a sanctuary Damien himself had built for her during the early days of their bond. Tonight, the garden offered no comfort. She sat on the edge of the stone fountain, staring at her reflection rippling in the moonlit water, and allowed herself, finally, to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, the kind of crying that came from deep exhaustion rather than sudden shock, the release of weeks of suppressed fear finally breaking free. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, sensing the wrongness in the bond, the strain pulling at something that was meant to be unbreakable. Mate bonds were sacred among wolves, formed by fate itself, meant to withstand every hardship life could offer. Elena had believed, with everything in her, that whatever trials came their way, she and Damien would face them together, bound by something stronger than doubt or temptation. Now, sitting alone in the moonlight, she wondered for the first time if that belief had been nothing more than a beautiful lie she had told herself for 6 years. A soft rustle in the bushes nearby startled her from her thoughts. She looked up to find Marcus standing at the edge of the garden, his expression troubled, clearly having witnessed her tears from a distance. "Elena," he said gently, approaching slowly, respectful of the space between them. "I couldn't help but overhear parts of what happened in the study." Elena wiped her face quickly, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable moment. "Marcus, please. I don't need pity right now." "It's not pity," he said, sitting down beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance. "It's concern. I've served Damien since we were pups together. I've never seen him behave this way before. Distracted, secretive. It isn't like him." "Then why won't he just tell me the truth?" Elena asked, her voice breaking despite her effort to remain composed. "Why does everyone dance around whatever this is, instead of simply being honest with me?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the moonlit garden, clearly wrestling with some internal conflict of his own. "I don't know everything," he finally admitted. "But I know Seraphine has wanted more than friendship with Damien for a long time, longer than you might realize." Elena's stomach twisted painfully. "How long?" "Years," Marcus said quietly. "Since before you arrived in the pack. Honestly, she never stopped believing she deserved to stand beside him as Luna. When the bond chose you instead, something in her changed, became colder, more calculating. And you're telling me this now because I think you deserve to protect yourself," Marcus said gently. "Whatever is happening, Elena, please don't let your guard down completely. Not until you know the full truth." Elena stared out at the quiet garden, Marcus's warning settling heavily over her already fractured heart. The mate bond was supposed to protect her from exactly this kind of pain, supposed to guarantee loyalty and devotion beyond question. Yet here she sat, abandoned in her own sanctuary, piecing together fragments of betrayal from healers and beta wolves, rather than the truth from her own mate. As the moon climbed higher above the trees, Elena made a quiet, painful decision. She would no longer wait passively for Damien to offer the truth on his own terms. If he would not tell her willingly, she would find it herself, no matter what that truth turned out to be, no matter how deeply it might shatter the life she had built. Because uncertainty, she realized, hurt far worse than even the darkest truth ever could. The following night, Elena did not sleep at all. She waited in the shadows near the private meeting chamber Grace had mentioned, hidden behind a thick stone pillar, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give her away. She told herself this was madness, that Aluna should never have to spy within her own pack estate to learn the truth about her own mate. Yet here she was, waiting in silence, driven by a desperate need to finally understand what was breaking her marriage apart. 2 sets. She pressed herself further into the shadows and watched as Damien appeared first, glancing carefully down the corridor before stepping into the private chamber. Moments later, Seraphine followed, slipping inside just as silently, closing the door softly behind her. Elena crept closer, her wolf senses sharpening every sound within the walls. Through the thin gap beneath the door, voices drifted out, hushed but audible. "You said this would be finished by now," Seraphine's voice hissed, sharp with impatience. "How much longer do you intend to keep pretending with her?" Elena's blood turned to ice. "It isn't that simple," Damien replied, his voice strained, exhausted. "Elena is still my mate. The pack still expects." "The pack expects a strong alpha," Seraphine interrupted coldly. "Not one paralyzed by guilt over a bond that should have been mine from the beginning." A long silence followed, and Elena pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from making a sound. "I never asked for any of this," Damien finally said, his voice quieter now, almost pained. "The bond chose Elena. I cannot simply undo something. Fate itself decided." "Fate," Seraphine repeated bitterly. "Fate is nothing but chance and instinct. What we share, Damien, what has grown between us these past months, that is choice. That is real." Elena's knees nearly buckled beneath her. She gripped the stone pillar for support, her entire world tilting sideways, as the final confirmation of Damien's betrayal settled into her bones like poison. "I never meant for this to happen," Damien said softly. "But you're right, something has changed. I feel it every time I look at you now." The sound of fabric shifting, quiet murmurs exchanged between them, was more than Elena could bear to hear. She pulled away from the door and fled down the corridor, her vision blurred with tears, her chest heaving with silent sobs she refused to let escape until she was far enough away to avoid detection. She did not return to her chambers that night. Instead, she wandered the estate grounds in a daze, her mind replaying every stolen fragment of conversation, every confirmation of exactly what she had feared and yet somehow still hoped was untrue. By morning, exhaustion and heartbreak had hollowed her out completely, leaving behind only a strange, brittle calm. She returned to her chambers just as the sun rose over the eastern hills, washed her face, and prepared herself for whatever confrontation the day would demand. She found Damien in the great hall later that morning, surrounded by pack elders discussing preparations for the upcoming harvest gathering. Elena waited at the edge of the room until the meeting concluded, and the elders filed out, leaving her alone with her mate, for the first time since overhearing the devastating conversation the night before. "We need to speak," Elena said, her voice steady despite the storm raging beneath her calm exterior. "Now, alone." Something in her tone must have alerted Damien to the shift within her, because his expression grew guarded immediately. He nodded and gestured toward a private side chamber, closing the heavy wooden door behind them. "I heard you last night," Elena said without preamble, watching closely for his reaction. "You and Seraphine, in the private meeting chamber." The color drained from Damien's face instantly. "Elena, I can explain." "Can you?" Her voice cracked, despite her effort to remain composed. "Because from where I stood, it sounded like a confession, Damien, not an explanation." He said nothing, his silence more damning than any words could have been. "How long?" Elena demanded, her voice rising now, anger finally breaking through the numb shock that had carried her through the sleepless night. "How long has this been happening?" "Elena, please." "How long?" she shouted, the sound echoing off the stone walls of the chamber. Damien flinched, guilt finally breaking through the careful composure he had maintained for weeks. "Months," he admitted quietly. "It started months ago. I never meant for it to go this far, Elena, I swear it." The confession, though expected, still landed like a physical blow. Elena staggered backward, gripping the edge of a nearby table for support, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. "You swore an oath to me," she whispered, her voice barely audible now. "In front of the entire pack. You promised nothing would ever come between us." "I never planned for this," Damien said, desperation creeping into his voice as he stepped toward her. "But something shifted between Seraphine and me. I can't explain it fully, even to myself." "Don't," Elena snapped, holding up a hand to stop him from coming any closer. "Don't you dare try to make this sound like something that simply happened to you, as though you bear no responsibility at all." Damien's jaw tightened, torn between guilt and the wounded pride of an alpha unaccustomed to being challenged so directly, even by his own mate. "What do you want me to say, Elena? That I'm sorry? I am sorry. More than you know." "Sorry doesn't undo months of lies," Elena said, her voice hollow now, drained of the anger that had briefly sustained her. "Sorry doesn't erase every night you left our bed to be with her instead." Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Elena searched his face one final time, desperately hoping to find some remnant of the devoted mate she had loved for 6 years. She found only exhaustion and guilt, and beneath that, something far more painful to witness, a quiet, resigned certainty that he had already, in his heart, begun choosing someone else. "What happens now?" Elena finally asked, though part of her already dreaded the answer. Damien was quiet for a long moment before speaking, his voice carefully measured, deliberately distant. "The pack cannot know the full truth, not yet. It would destabilize everything we've built." Elena felt something inside her chest crack completely at his words. Even now, faced with the wreckage of their bond, Damien's first concern remained the stability of his reign, rather than the woman standing broken before him. "So that's it," she said quietly. "You expect me to simply pretend, to smile beside you at gatherings, while you continue meeting her in secret?" "I need time, Elena," Damien said, his voice pleading now. "Time to figure out what comes next. For the pack's sake." "And what about my sake?" Elena's voice broke completely now, tears finally spilling freely down her cheeks. "Do I matter at all in whatever calculations you're making?" Damien did not answer, and his silence, once again, told her everything she needed to know. Elena turned and walked out of the chamber without another word, her legs carrying her on pure instinct through the quiet corridors of the estate she had once called home. She did not know where she was going, only that she could not remain in that room a moment longer, breathing the same air as the man who had shattered everything she believed to be unbreakable. Word of the confrontation, despite Damien's insistence on secrecy, began spreading through the pack within days. Whispers followed Elena wherever she walked now, pitying glances from those who had once looked upon her with admiration and respect. The humiliation cut nearly as deep as the betrayal itself, knowing that every wolf within Crimson Moon now understood, in some form or another, that their beloved Luna had been cast aside for another woman's affections. Seraphine, emboldened by Damien's continued silence and inaction, grew bolder in her presence around the estate, no longer bothering to hide the satisfied gleam in her eyes whenever she passed Elena in the halls. The message was unmistakable. Seraphine believed victory was already hers. Elena spent the following days in a haze of grief and quiet fury, torn between the instinct to fight for what remained of her marriage and the growing realization that perhaps nothing remained worth fighting for at all. Her wolf, wounded and confused by the fracturing bond, grew restless and unpredictable, pacing beneath her skin, as though sensing the coming storm, long before Elena herself was ready to face it. Late one evening, as she stood alone in the private garden that had once brought her peace, Elena finally allowed herself to ask the question she had been avoiding since the moment she overheard that fateful conversation. What was left for her within these walls, within this pack, beside a mate who had already, in every way that mattered, chosen someone else? The answer, though painful, began forming slowly within her wounded heart. Nothing. There was nothing left for her here. And soon, Elena suspected, the choice of whether to stay or leave might not even remain hers to make at all. The gathering hall had never felt so cold. Elena stood at the center of the great stone room, surrounded by every prominent wolf within Crimson Moon, summoned there without explanation just an hour earlier. She had expected many things when the pack elders called an emergency assembly, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. Damien stood at the raised platform above the gathered crowd, Seraphine positioned just slightly behind his right shoulder, close enough that the message could not be misunderstood by anyone present. Elena felt every eye in the room shift toward her, felt the weight of 100 whispered questions pressing against her skin. Pack members of Crimson Moon, Damien began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of an alpha addressing his people, though Elena noticed the slight tremor beneath his words, the discomfort he could not fully hide. I have called this gathering to address matters concerning the future leadership of this pack. Elena's stomach twisted into a painful knot. She glanced toward Marcus, standing near the edge of the platform, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes carried a warning she recognized instantly. Whatever was about to happen, it would not be gentle. After careful consideration, Damien continued, refusing to meet Elena's gaze directly. It has become necessary to reevaluate the position of Luna within this pack. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Elena felt the blood drain from her face, understanding immediately where this humiliating spectacle was heading. Damien, she said quietly, though her voice carried clearly through the suddenly silent hall. What is this? He finally looked at her then, and for one brief moment, Elena saw something like regret flicker across his features, before it hardened again into cold resolve. Elena, the strength of this pack depends on stability, at every level of leadership. Recent circumstances have made it clear that continued instability within our bond threatens that foundation. You're doing this here? Elena's voice cracked, disbelief and fury battling for control over her trembling body. In front of the entire pack, instead of speaking with me privately? This concerns every wolf within Crimson Moon, Damien said, though the excuse sounded hollow even as he spoke it. Transparency is necessary for the pack's trust in its leadership. Seraphine's lips curved into the faintest hint of a satisfied smile, quickly hidden, but not quickly enough to escape Elena's notice. This had been planned, carefully orchestrated to strip away Elena's dignity in front of everyone she had once called family, ensuring she had no opportunity to defend herself privately before the humiliation became public record. Effective immediately, Damien continued, his voice gaining false confidence with every word. Elena will step down from her position as Luna of Crimson Moon. The words hit Elena like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs entirely. Around her, the gathered pack members erupted into a chorus of shocked murmurs, some sympathetic glances thrown her way, others already turning curiously toward Seraphine as though anticipating her natural elevation to the vacant position. 6 years, Elena said, her voice trembling but growing stronger with each word, refusing to be silenced, without at least speaking her truth. 6 years, I served this pack faithfully, as your Luna. I nursed your sick, settled your disputes, protected your children, as though they were my own. And this is how you choose to end it? Discarding me in front of everyone, without even the decency of a private conversation first? Damien's jaw tightened, guilt flickering behind his eyes, but pride and perhaps fear of appearing weak before his pack kept him rooted firmly in his cruel decision. This is what's best for Crimson Moon. No, Elena said, her voice suddenly steady, clear enough to carry to every corner of the silent hall. This is what's best for you, and for her. She turned her gaze toward Seraphine, who met her stare with undisguised triumph, rather than any flicker of shame. Elena, please, Damien said, his composure finally cracking slightly under the weight of the pack's collective judgment, though it was far too late for any softness to matter now. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. You made this difficult the moment you chose to break your vows, Elena replied, her voice steady, despite the tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. Everything that follows is simply the consequence of that choice. She turned away from him then, refusing to grant him the satisfaction of watching her break down completely in front of the pack that had once adored her. She walked slowly toward the great doors at the rear of the hall, her spine straight, her chin lifted, refusing to let humiliation bend her posture, even as her heart shattered with every step. Behind her, she heard Damien's voice calling her name, though whether from genuine regret or simple concern for how the scene appeared to his pack, Elena no longer cared to determine. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors and stepped out into the cold evening air, finally allowing the tears to fall freely once the crowd could no longer witness her pain. Word of her removal spread through the pack estate like wildfire. By the following morning, Elena found herself packing what few belongings remained truly hers, most of her possessions having become intertwined with her role as Luna over the past 6 years. A small trunk, a handful of dresses, the modest jewelry she had brought with her from her family home before the bond had ever formed. Everything else, the fine gowns, the ceremonial jewelry marking her status, the very rooms she had called home, belonged to the position she no longer held. Marcus found her in the courtyard as she prepared to leave, his expression heavy with an apology he clearly did not know how to voice adequately. "Elena, I'm so sorry. I never imagined he would go this far." "Don't apologize for him," Elena said quietly, tying the last strap on her modest travel bag. "You did nothing wrong, Marcus. You were kind to me, when few others dared to be honest." "Where will you go?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Elena paused, staring out at the vast forest stretching beyond the pack borders, suddenly aware that for the first time in her adult life, she had no clear answer to that question. No pack to belong to, no mate to protect her, no title to define her purpose. "I don't know yet," she admitted honestly, "but I cannot remain here, not after this." Marcus reached into his coat and pressed a small pouch of coins into her hand before she could protest. "For the journey," he said firmly, when she tried to refuse. "Please, Elena, let me do this much, at least." She accepted the gift with quiet gratitude, embracing Marcus briefly before turning toward the estate gates one final time. She did not look back at the grand stone building that had been her home for 6 years, did not search for any final glimpse of the mate who had so thoroughly discarded her. Some doors, she understood now, were meant to remain firmly closed once crossed. The forest beyond Crimson Moon's borders stretched wide and unfamiliar, neutral territory belonging to no particular pack, dangerous for a lone wolf traveling without protection or purpose. Elena walked for hours, her wolf senses alert to every rustle of leaves, every distant howl carrying through the trees, though exhaustion and grief made focus increasingly difficult to maintain. By nightfall, she found a small clearing beside a shallow stream and allowed herself to finally rest, her body collapsing against the base of an ancient oak tree as the adrenaline of the day's events finally drained away, leaving only bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. She thought of her wedding day, 6 years earlier, the joy and certainty she had felt standing before the entire pack, promising herself to a man she believed would cherish her forever. She thought of the nights they had spent curled together beneath star-filled skies, whispering dreams for their future, plans for the family they hoped to build together. All of it, she now understood, had been slowly crumbling for months, without her awareness, hollowed out by secrets and betrayal, until nothing remained but the fragile illusion of a bond already broken. Her wolf whimpered softly beneath her skin, the pain of the severed connection settling into her bones like a physical wound. Mate bonds, once formed, were never meant to be broken. The tearing sensation Elena felt now, as though something vital had been ripped violently from her chest, confirmed exactly how deeply Damien's betrayal had wounded, not just her heart, but the very core of her wolf spirit. She curled beneath the ancient oak tree, pulling her thin travel cloak tighter around her shoulders against the growing chill of night, and allowed herself, finally, completely, to grieve. Not just the loss of her position, or even the loss of her mate, but the loss of the woman she had been before betrayal, taught her that even the strongest bonds could shatter without warning. Somewhere in the darkness surrounding her, unfamiliar territory stretched in every direction, dangerous and uncertain. Elena had no pack, no protection, no clear destination guiding her steps forward, yet as exhaustion finally pulled her into restless sleep beneath the ancient oak, a small, stubborn ember of resilience remained lit within her wounded heart. She had survived betrayal. Somehow, she would learn to survive whatever came next as well. Pain shot through Elena's leg the moment she tried to stand, sharp and immediate, forcing a gasp from her lips as she collapsed back against the forest floor. She had been walking for 3 days now, surviving on what little food she could forage, and the small pouch of coins Marcus had given her, though coins meant little when no settlements appeared for miles in any direction. Sometime during the previous night, exhausted and moving carelessly through unfamiliar terrain, she had misjudged a steep embankment and tumbled down rocky ground, twisting her ankle badly enough that walking now felt nearly impossible. She was alone, injured, and completely unprotected in territory she did not recognize, territory that almost certainly belonged to another pack entirely. The realization sent a fresh wave of panic through her chest. Unclaimed wolves wandering into another pack's land without permission were rarely shown mercy, especially one as weakened and vulnerable as Elena currently found herself. She tried again to stand, gritting her teeth against the pain, determined to find somewhere safer, before nightfall brought predators far more dangerous than twisted ankles. She had managed only a few limping steps before the sound of approaching footsteps froze her entirely in place. A low growl rumbled from the tree line ahead, and Elena's heart lurched into her throat as a massive gray wolf emerged from the shadows, its eyes locked onto her with predatory intensity. She recognized immediately, from its sheer size and the aura of dominance radiating from its presence, that this was no ordinary wolf. This was an alpha. The wolf shifted seamlessly into human form, revealing a tall, powerfully built man with dark hair and sharp, assessing eyes that studied Elena with obvious suspicion. His expression carried none of the warmth or hospitality she might have hoped for, only cold calculation, as he took in her disheveled appearance, the torn hem of her travel cloak, the way she favored her injured leg, even while standing perfectly still. "You're trespassing on Shadowfang territory," he said, his voice low and commanding, carrying an authority that left no room for argument. "State your business here, and be quick about it." Elena straightened as best she could, despite the throbbing pain in her ankle, refusing to let fear completely overtake her voice. "I mean no harm to your pack. I was simply passing through when I lost my footing. I intend to leave your territory as soon as I'm able." The alpha's sharp eyes narrowed slightly, studying her more carefully now. "You're wounded." "I'll manage," Elena said, though the words came out weaker than she intended, betrayed by the exhaustion and pain, finally catching up with her depleted strength. As if to prove her wrong entirely, her legs chose that exact moment to give out beneath her, and Elena felt herself falling before she could stop it. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground, and she found herself staring up into the alpha's intense gaze, from a distance far closer than she would have preferred under any other circumstances. "You're not managing at all," he said, though something in his tone had shifted slightly, the cold suspicion tempered now by something closer to reluctant concern. "Please," Elena said, embarrassment coloring her cheeks at her own weakness. "I don't wish to be a burden on your pack. If you could simply point me toward the nearest settlement, I'll trouble you no further." The alpha studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing something internally, before finally speaking again. "What's your name?" "Elena," she answered simply, deciding against revealing her former title as Luna of Crimson Moon. That identity belonged to a life that no longer existed, a life she had no interest in claiming any connection to now. "I'm Kane," he said, his voice softening incrementally. "Alpha of Shadowfang Pack." He studied her injured ankle for a moment longer before making a decision. "I won't leave an injured wolf alone in these woods, regardless of territory boundaries. My pack's healer can look at that ankle. After that, you're free to continue on your way, if that's truly what you wish." Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to insist on her independence despite her obvious injury, but exhaustion and pain finally overwhelmed her pride entirely. She nodded weakly, allowing Kane to lift her carefully into his arms, his grip firm, but surprisingly gentle, as he carried her through the forest, toward the Shadowfang estate. The pack grounds, when they finally emerged from the tree line, looked nothing like the grand stone architecture of Crimson Moon. Shadowfang's estate was built more simply, sturdy wooden structures blending seamlessly into the surrounding forest, rather than dominating the landscape with ostentatious displays of wealth and power. Something about the modest, practical design felt oddly comforting to Elena, a stark contrast to the gilded cage she had left behind. Kane carried her directly to the pack's healing quarters, where an older woman with kind eyes and steady hands immediately began examining Elena's swollen ankle. "Nothing broken," the healer announced after careful inspection. "Just a bad sprain. She'll need rest and limited movement for several days, at minimum." "Several days," Elena repeated, panic creeping back into her voice. "I can't impose on your hospitality for that long." "You're not imposing," Kane said firmly, surprising her with the certainty in his tone. "Shadowfang doesn't turn away wolves in need, regardless of pack affiliation. You'll stay until you're fully healed. After that, where you go is entirely your own decision." Elena studied him carefully, searching for any hidden motive behind his unexpected generosity, though she found none evident in his steady, guarded expression. "Why would you help someone from a rival pack so easily?" Something flickered across Kane's face, brief and difficult to read. "Because I understand what it means to need help and receive none," he said quietly, offering no further explanation, before turning and leaving her alone with the healer. Over the following days, Elena remained within the modest guest quarters provided by the Shadowfang pack, her ankle slowly healing under the careful attention of their skilled healer. She learned, through quiet conversations with pack members who brought meals and checked on her recovery, that Cain had earned his position as alpha through hardship rather than simple inheritance, having rebuilt Shadowfang from near collapse after a devastating conflict years earlier, had claimed both his parents and nearly destroyed the pack entirely. The wolves of Shadowfang spoke of their alpha with genuine respect and quiet affection, describing him as fair, if guarded, a leader who had sacrificed much to ensure his pack's survival and prosperity. Elena found herself curious about this complicated man, who had shown her unexpected kindness, despite having every reason, given rival pack tensions, to turn her away entirely. On the fourth day of her recovery, Cain visited her quarters personally for the first time since bringing her to the estate, carrying a simple meal of bread and stew that he set down on the small table beside her bed. "The healer says your ankle is healing well," he said, settling into the chair across from her with careful, measured movements. "Another few days and you should be able to walk without significant pain." "Thank you," Elena said sincerely, "for everything. I know Shadowfang had no obligation to help me." Cain studied her for a long moment, something thoughtful in his sharp gaze. "You never mentioned which pack you originally belonged to." Elena hesitated, unsure how much of her painful history she wished to reveal to this stranger, however kind he had proven himself to be. "Crimson Moon," she finally admitted quietly, "though I no longer hold any position there." Something shifted in Cain's expression at the mention of Crimson Moon, though he said nothing immediately, simply waiting for her to continue if she chose. "I was there, Luna," Elena continued, surprising herself with her own honesty, "until my mate chose someone else, and had me removed from my position in front of the entire pack." Cain's jaw tightened visibly at her words, something protective flashing briefly behind his controlled expression, before he composed himself again. "Damien did this?" Elena's eyes widened with surprise. "You know him?" "Every alpha in this region knows of Damien," Cain said, his voice carrying a hint of contempt he made no effort to fully hide. "Though I never expected him foolish enough to cast aside a mate bond so carelessly." Something about the quiet anger in his voice, defending her honor, despite having known her only a handful of days, settled warmly in Elena's chest, a feeling she had almost forgotten existed after months of betrayal and humiliation. "I appreciate your concern," Elena said softly, "but you needn't trouble yourself with my personal misfortunes." "Perhaps I want to," Cain said, the words seeming to surprise even himself as he spoke them. He cleared his throat quickly, retreating slightly behind his usual guarded composure. "You're welcome to remain within Shadowfang territory as long as necessary, Elena, regardless of your history with Crimson Moon." As Cain rose to leave, Elena found herself studying his retreating figure with unexpected curiosity. A small, tentative warmth, blooming quietly within her wounded heart, for the first time since Damien's betrayal had shattered everything she once believed unbreakable. Perhaps, she thought as the door closed softly behind him, this unexpected detour into unfamiliar territory might offer more than simple shelter and healing. Perhaps it might offer, however cautiously, the first fragile beginnings of something entirely new. Weeks passed within the Shadowfang estate, and Elena found herself slowly transforming from a grieving, broken woman into someone steadier, someone rediscovering pieces of her identity that had nothing to do with the title of Luna she once held so proudly. Her ankle healed completely within the first 2 weeks, yet she found herself reluctant to leave, drawn by a growing sense of belonging within this modest, close-knit pack that had shown her nothing but kindness since the day Cain found her injured in the forest. She began assisting the pack healer, Grace, whose skills reminded Elena so strongly of another healer she once knew, that the coincidence brought a bittersweet smile whenever she considered it. Elena's own knowledge of herbal remedies and wound care, cultivated over years of tending to Crimson Moon's pack members, proved genuinely useful within Shadowfang's smaller healing quarters, and slowly, she found purpose again in caring for others. She also spent considerable time with the pack's youngest members, teaching the pups simple lessons and stories in the evenings, watching their eager faces light up with the kind of unguarded joy she desperately needed to witness after months surrounded by political scheming and betrayal. Something about their innocent laughter helped mend pieces of her heart she had assumed were permanently broken. Kane, despite his naturally guarded demeanor, found himself seeking Elena's company more frequently as the weeks progressed. Their conversations began simply enough, discussions about pack matters, or the healing herbs she cultivated in the small garden she had started behind the healing quarters, but gradually deepened into something more personal, more vulnerable than either of them had initially intended. One evening, as autumn winds began sweeping through the surrounding forest, Elena found Kane sitting alone, near the edge of a quiet pond within the estate grounds, his expression distant and troubled, in a way she had rarely witnessed during her time within Shadowfang. "May I join you?" she asked softly, settling beside him without waiting for a response, comfortable enough now within his presence to take such small liberties. Kane glanced at her, something unreadable flickering behind his sharp eyes, before he nodded slightly. "Tonight marks the anniversary of my parents' passing," he said quietly, surprising her with the sudden vulnerability of his admission, the conflict that nearly destroyed this pack. Elena remained silent, sensing he needed space to continue without interruption. "I was barely 18 when I became Alpha," Kane continued, his voice carrying old grief he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge openly. "Thrust into leadership during the worst crisis this pack has ever faced, with no time to properly mourn my own parents, before I needed to rebuild everything from ruins." "That must have been incredibly difficult," Elena said gently. "It was," Kane admitted. "For years, I convinced myself that focusing entirely on rebuilding Shadowfang left no room for anything else. No mate bond, no personal happiness, just duty and survival." "And now?" Elena asked quietly, though she suspected she already understood the direction of his thoughts. Kane turned to look at her directly, something warm and uncertain shifting behind his usually guarded expression. "Now I find myself questioning whether duty alone was ever truly enough." Elena's breath caught slightly at the intensity in his gaze, though she said nothing, allowing the moment to stretch quietly between them beneath the darkening evening sky. "You've changed something within this pack, Elena," Kane continued softly. "Within me, if I'm honest. I never expected to find myself drawn so completely to someone I discovered injured in my own territory." "Kane," Elena said carefully, though her heart raced with unexpected hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. "I still carry wounds from what happened with Damien. I'm not certain I'm ready for—" "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," Kane interrupted gently. "I only wanted you to understand what I've been feeling, however complicated the timing may be." Elena studied his face carefully in the fading evening light, searching for any trace of the manipulation or hidden agenda she had learned, painfully, to watch for after Damien's betrayal. She found none, only quiet, guarded honesty, offered without pressure or expectation. "Thank you," she finally said softly, "for your patience and your honesty." They sat together in comfortable silence, as darkness fully settled over the pond, something unspoken but undeniably present, growing quietly between them, patient and careful, unlike the whirlwind intensity that had once defined her connection with Damien. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened gradually, built not on the sudden lightning strike of instant mate recognition, but on shared meals, quiet conversations, and small moments of genuine understanding. Kane began seeking her opinion on pack matters, valuing her insight in ways Damien rarely had during their years together. Elena found herself laughing more freely, her wounded spirit slowly healing beneath the steady warmth of Kane's careful attention. Meanwhile, whispers began drifting into Shadowfang territory, carrying news from Crimson Moon. Pack members returning from trade negotiations spoke of growing unrest within Damien's territory, rumors of Seraphine's increasing influence over pack decisions, and quiet dissatisfaction among wolves who had once respected their alpha's judgment completely. Elena listened to these fragments of news with complicated emotions, no longer the raw devastation she had felt immediately following her exile, but something more distant now, almost like hearing stories about a stranger's life, rather than her own painful history. The distance surprised her, and she recognized within it genuine evidence of healing finally taking root. One afternoon, while working alongside Grace in the healing quarters, Elena found herself confiding fully in the young healer about her growing feelings toward Kane, uncertain how to navigate emotions that felt both wonderful and terrifying after everything she had survived. You deserve happiness, Elena, Grace said firmly, continuing to grind herbs as she spoke. After everything that happened at Crimson Moon, you deserve to feel valued and cherished again. But is it too soon? Elena asked, voicing the fear that had lingered quietly beneath her growing feelings for weeks now. My bond with Damien was severed only months ago. Is it wrong to feel this way about someone else already? There's no proper timeline for healing, Grace said wisely, setting down her tools to look directly at Elena. Cain has shown you nothing but patience and genuine care since the day he found you. That's rare, Elena. Rarer than you might realize, especially among alphas accustomed to taking whatever they want without consideration for others. Elena considered her words carefully, recognizing the truth within them. Cain had never once pressured her, never once made her feel obligated to reciprocate feelings before she felt genuinely ready. His patience, his steady respect for her boundaries, stood in stark contrast to the possessive urgency Damien had often displayed, even during the happiest years of their bond. That evening, Elena found Cain in his study, reviewing reports from the pack's eastern border patrols. She knocked softly on the open door, and he looked up immediately, something warm flickering behind his sharp eyes at the sight of her. Elena, he said, setting aside his papers entirely. Is something wrong? No, she said, stepping into the room and closing the door softly behind her. I simply wanted to tell you something. Cain waited patiently, giving her space to continue at her own pace. These past weeks within Shadowfang, Elena said slowly, choosing her words with careful honesty, have given me something I thought I lost entirely after Damien's betrayal. Hope. Genuine hope for happiness again. Something hopeful flickered behind Cain's guarded expression, though he remained still, allowing her to finish without interruption. I'm not certain what exactly is growing between us, Elena continued, but I no longer wish to pretend I don't feel it. Whatever this is, Cain, I want to explore it honestly, without fear holding me back any longer. Cain rose from his desk slowly, closing the distance between them with careful, deliberate steps, giving her every opportunity to retreat if she wished. When she remained still, meeting his gaze steadily, he reached out and gently took her hand within his own. I've felt something building between us since the very first night I carried you through these woods, he admitted softly. I only worried that pushing too quickly might cause more harm than good, given everything you've survived. You've never pushed, Elena said, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling within her chest. You've only ever been patient, kind, honest. Cain's thumb traced gentle circles against the back of her hand, his expression carrying a warmth Elena had rarely witnessed from him during her time within the pack. Then perhaps, he said quietly, we might discover together exactly what this growing connection between us truly means. Standing together within the quiet study, moonlight spilling gently through the window behind them, Elena felt something shifting deep within her chest, something warm and hopeful stirring beneath scars she had assumed would never fully heal. For the first time since Damien's devastating betrayal, she allowed herself to believe genuinely in the possibility of a second chance at real, unwavering happiness. A sharp, unexpected pain shot through Elena's chest one crisp morning, so sudden and intense that she nearly dropped the basket of herbs she carried through the healing garden. She pressed a hand against her sternum, gasping softly, as an unfamiliar warmth spread outward through her entire body, entirely different from the aching wound the severed bond with Damien had left behind. Grace, working nearby, noticed immediately and rushed to her side. Elena, what's wrong? I don't know, Elena admitted, still catching her breath as the strange sensation continued pulsing through her chest. It felt like something shifting, deep inside. Understanding dawned slowly across Grace's face, her eyes widening with cautious excitement. Elena, that sensation. Have you been spending significant time near Cain recently? Every day, Elena said, confusion coloring her voice. Why does that matter? Because, Grace said carefully, that feeling you're describing sounds remarkably similar to the earliest stages of a forming mate bond. Elena's breath caught entirely. That's impossible. I already carry the marks of a bond, even a broken one. Second bonds are exceptionally rare, nearly unheard of. Rare, yes, Grace agreed. But not entirely impossible, especially when a previous bond has been severed completely, through betrayal and rejection, rather than simply weakened through distance. The wolf spirit sometimes recognizes new potential, once fully released from a previous connection. The implications of Grace's words settled slowly over Elena, equal parts terrifying and thrilling. She found Kane later that same afternoon, overseeing training exercises within the pack's central yard, and something in his expression the moment their eyes met told her immediately that he had felt the same overwhelming shift within his own chest. "You felt it too," she said softly, approaching him carefully. Kane nodded slowly, something between wonder and disbelief written clearly across his usually guarded features. "I've never heard of anything like this happening before. A second bond forming after the first was broken." "Grace says it's exceptionally rare, but not impossible," Elena said, "especially given how completely Damien severed our original connection." They stood together in tense, hopeful silence, both grappling with the enormity of what this discovery might mean for their still developing relationship. A true mate bond carried weight far beyond simple romantic affection, representing fate's own recognition of two souls destined to remain together permanently. "What do you want to do?" Kane finally asked, his voice carefully neutral, despite the hope Elena could clearly see burning behind his controlled expression. Elena considered the question seriously, aware that her answer would fundamentally alter the course of both their lives moving forward. "I want to explore this," she finally said, her voice growing steadier with each word. "I want to discover, honestly and without fear, whether what's forming between us is truly meant to be." Relief and joy flickered simultaneously across Kane's face, though he remained composed, respectful of the significant weight such a decision carried, for someone who had already survived one devastating betrayal. "Then we'll take this slowly," he said gently, "at whatever pace feels right for you." Over the following days, the sensation within Elena's chest grew steadily stronger whenever she found herself near Kane, an undeniable pull she could no longer dismiss as simple attraction or gratitude for his kindness. Her wolf recognized something deeper occurring, something ancient and instinctive, stirring alongside the growing emotional connection they had carefully built together over recent months. News of the developing bond, despite their attempts at discretion, spread quickly through the tight-knit Shadowfang community. Reactions varied considerably among pack members, some expressing genuine happiness for their alpha finally finding a mate after years of solitary dedication to rebuilding the pack. Others expressing quiet concern about the unprecedented nature of a second bond forming after Elena's previous connection had been so publicly and painfully severed. Some believe it violates natural order. Marcus, having traveled personally from Crimson Moon, upon hearing rumors of Elena's circumstances, explained one afternoon, during an unexpected visit. He had sought her out specifically, concerned for her well-being, after learning of both her exile and her subsequent connection to Shadowfang's Alpha. "And what do you believe?" Elena asked, genuinely curious about her old friend's perspective. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "I believe fate rarely follows rules mortals fully understand," he said thoughtfully. "If your wolf recognizes something real and true within Kane, I see no reason to doubt that connection, simply because it defies convention." Elena appreciated his honesty, grateful that at least one connection from her previous life remained genuinely supportive, rather than judgmental. "How are things at Crimson Moon?" she asked carefully. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "Not well," he admitted. "Seraphine has taken increasing control over pack decisions, and dissent grows louder each week. Many wolves speak openly now about regretting how Damien handled your removal. His judgment has been questioned repeatedly since Seraphine's influence became public knowledge." "And Damien himself?" Elena asked, surprised to find the question emerged without the sharp pain it once would have carried. "Troubled," Marcus said simply. "I believe he's beginning to understand the full weight of what he lost, though pride prevents him from acknowledging it openly, even to himself." Elena absorbed this information quietly, recognizing within herself a genuine indifference toward Damien's current struggles that surprised her with its completeness. Whatever remained of her feelings for her former mate had clearly transformed entirely into distant, dispassionate awareness rather than lingering heartbreak. "Thank you for telling me," she said sincerely, "and for traveling all this way to check on me. You deserve genuine friends who care for your well-being," Marcus said warmly, regardless of pack politics or personal history. After Marcus departed to return to Crimson Moon, Elena found herself reflecting deeply on how dramatically her circumstances had shifted within just a few short months. From devastated, exiled Luna to a woman standing at the threshold of an entirely new, unprecedented bond with an alpha who had shown her nothing but patience, respect, and genuine care since the very moment they met. That evening, Kane found her sitting quietly beside the same pond where they had first openly acknowledged their growing feelings for each other weeks earlier. He settled beside her without hesitation now, comfortable within the intimacy they had carefully built together. Marcus mentioned Crimson Moon is struggling, Elena said softly, watching moonlight ripple gently across the pond's calm surface. Word travels quickly, even between rival territories, Kane acknowledged. Damien's judgment has been questioned repeatedly since his handling of your situation became widely known. Does it concern you? Elena asked. Instability within a neighboring pack? Kane considered the question seriously before answering. Somewhat, he admitted. Instability anywhere creates potential complications for surrounding territories. But honestly, Elena, my primary concern remains your well-being, not political maneuvering within a pack that treated you so poorly. Elena smiled softly at his answer, appreciating the genuine priority he placed on her happiness above broader political concerns. I want you to know, she said carefully, that whatever grows between us, I need it built entirely on honesty. No hidden agendas, no secrets kept for supposed protection. You have my word, Kane said firmly, meeting her gaze directly. I've watched what secrets and dishonesty did to your previous bond, Elena. I have no intention of repeating those same devastating mistakes. Something within Elena's chest settled peacefully at his sincere promise, the mate bond pulsing gently beneath her skin, as though acknowledging and affirming the genuine trust building steadily between them. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his own, and Kane accepted the gesture warmly, drawing her slightly closer against his side. I think, Elena said softly, resting her head against his shoulder as they watched the moon's reflection dance quietly across the water, that I'm ready to fully embrace whatever this bond means for our future together. Kane pressed a gentle kiss against the top of her head, his voice carrying quiet wonder and profound gratitude. Then together, he said softly, we'll discover exactly what fate intended, when it brought you stumbling, injured, and broken, into my territory that first night. Beneath the peaceful moonlight, surrounded by the quiet forest that had become her true home, Elena felt, for the first time since Damien's devastating betrayal, complete and genuine hope for the future, unfolding steadily before her. Shouting erupted through the halls of Crimson Moon's estate, loud enough that pack members throughout the grounds paused their daily tasks to listen with growing alarm. Damien stood in his study, facing three of his most senior pack elders, their expressions carrying none of the deferential respect they had once shown him without question. The Eastern Territories report our patrols have grown careless, Elder Oliver said sharply, slamming a stack of reports onto Damien's desk. 3 separate boundary breaches in the past month alone, Alpha. Unheard of under your father's leadership. I'm aware of the reports, Damien said tightly, though exhaustion and stress had worn visibly at his once confident composure over recent weeks. Are you also aware, Elder Oliver continued, unwilling to back down, that pack morale has fallen so significantly that 3 families have already requested transfers to neighboring territories? Damien's jaw tightened, though he offered no immediate response, uncertain how to defend leadership decisions that had grown increasingly difficult to justify even to himself. This began the moment you cast aside your mate, another elder, a stern woman named Hannah, added coldly. Whatever personal reasons drove that decision, Alpha, the pack has suffered tremendously from the instability it created. Seraphine's guidance has proven valuable in numerous matters, Damien said defensively, though his voice lacked genuine conviction. Seraphine's guidance, Elder Oliver said sharply, has divided loyalties within this pack, more thoroughly than any external threat we've faced in decades. Wolves no longer trust the judgment of their own alpha. The elders departed shortly afterward, leaving Damien alone with the weight of their harsh but accurate assessment. He sank heavily into his chair, running trembling hands through his hair as the full magnitude of his declining leadership finally settled fully upon him. Seraphine entered his study moments later, her expression carrying none of the sympathy he desperately needed in that moment. The elders seem particularly agitated today, she observed coolly, settling into the chair across from his desk without invitation. They're questioning my judgment, Damien said quietly, regarding everything. Elena, you, the pack's stability. Something flickered behind Seraphine's eyes, quickly masked, but not quickly enough to escape Damien's notice. Perhaps they simply need time to adjust to new leadership priorities, she offered, though her voice carried less confidence than her words suggested. Or perhaps, Damien said slowly, meeting her gaze directly for the first time in weeks, they're correctly recognizing that I made a terrible mistake. Seraphine's expression hardened immediately. You're not suggesting you regret our connection. I'm suggesting, Damien said, his voice growing steadier, as clarity finally began cutting through months of confused infatuation and misguided pride, that I sacrificed everything genuinely valuable in my life, pursuing something that has brought nothing but instability and regret. Damien, I discarded my mate, he continued, standing now, pacing restlessly across his study, as months of suppressed guilt finally broke free entirely. In front of my entire pack, I humiliated her publicly, rather than simply admitting my own failures honestly. You made the right decision for your leadership, Seraphine insisted, though panic had crept into her voice now, recognizing the shift occurring within Damien's demeanor. Did I? Damien asked, turning to face her fully. Because from where I'm standing, Seraphine, I destroyed a bond fate itself chose for me, damaged the trust of my entire pack, and for what exactly? A connection that, if I'm being completely honest with myself, never carried the depth or genuine partnership Elena and I once shared. Seraphine rose from her chair, her composure finally cracking under the weight of Damien's brutal honesty. You cannot simply discard me the way you discarded her, she said, her voice sharp with rising desperation. I'm not discarding anyone, Damien said quietly. I'm finally acknowledging the truth I've avoided facing for months. What we built together, Seraphine, was never real partnership. It was ambition disguised as affection. How dare you? I dare, Damien interrupted firmly, because my pack deserves better leadership than I've provided these past months, and because Elena deserved far better than the cruelty I showed her. Seraphine stormed from his study without another word, leaving Damien alone with the full weight of his belated realization. He sat back down heavily, staring at the reports scattered across his desk, finally understanding with complete clarity exactly how thoroughly he had destroyed everything genuinely valuable in his pursuit of something ultimately hollow. Over the following days, whispers of Damien's confrontation with Seraphine spread quickly through the pack, along with rumors that her influence over pack decisions had suddenly and dramatically diminished. Some pack members expressed cautious hope that their alpha might finally be recognizing his previous mistakes, though skepticism remained widespread, given the significant damage already inflicted upon pack morale and stability. Damien summoned Marcus to his study one evening, his expression carrying a heaviness his old friend had rarely witnessed during their years of close partnership. I need honest counsel, Damien admitted quietly, something I clearly failed to seek adequately these past months. What would you like to know? Marcus asked carefully, still uncertain how much trust to extend given recent events. Elena, Damien said simply. How is she? Truly? Marcus considered his answer carefully, weighing loyalty toward his old friend against protective concern for Elena's well-being. She's healing, he finally said, building a new life for herself within Shadowfang territory. Something painful flickered across Damien's expression at the mention of Shadowfang. With Cain, he said quietly, not quite a question. Yes, Marcus confirmed. Their bond appears genuine, Damien, built on mutual respect and honesty. Damien absorbed this information silently, old regret mixing painfully with something that felt uncomfortably close to jealousy, though he recognized he possessed no legitimate claim to such feelings after everything he had done. Do you believe, Damien asked slowly, that I could ever properly make amends for how thoroughly I wronged her? Marcus considered the question seriously before answering honestly. I believe Elena has found genuine happiness within Shadowfang, he said carefully. Whatever amends you hope to offer, Damien, I suspect her healing has already progressed well beyond needing anything further from you. The words landed heavily, though Damien recognized the fundamental truth within them. Whatever damage his betrayal and subsequent cruelty had inflicted upon Elena, she had somehow found the strength to rebuild her life, entirely apart from him, discovering genuine happiness within another pack, another bond, another future that no longer included him whatsoever. I need to see her, Damien said suddenly, the words surprising even himself as he spoke them. To properly apologize, at minimum, for how I handled everything. Marcus studied his old friend carefully before responding. That's a decision only you can make, Damien. But I would caution you seriously against expecting any particular outcome from such a visit. Elena has moved forward with her life. Whatever closure you seek for your own conscience shouldn't come at the cost of disrupting the peace she's finally found. Damien nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom within Marcus's warning, though the need to properly address his devastating mistakes continued burning steadily within his conscience. Whatever came from confronting Elena again, whatever reception awaited him within Shadowfang territory, he recognized finally that avoiding accountability any longer would only compound the damage he had already inflicted upon everyone involved. As autumn deepened into the earliest signs of approaching winter, Crimson Moonpack continued struggling beneath the weight of diminished trust and unstable leadership, consequences of choices made in pursuit of temporary infatuation rather than genuine, lasting partnership. Damien, finally confronting the full magnitude of his mistakes, understood that whatever path toward redemption existed, it would require far more than simple apologies or belated recognition of his failures. It would require rebuilding, from the ground up, everything he had so carelessly destroyed, beginning with the difficult, uncertain journey toward properly facing the woman he had wronged so completely. A horn sounded sharply from the northern watchtower, echoing urgently across Shadowfang's estate grounds. Elena looked up from the healing garden where she had been working alongside Grace, instantly recognizing the alarm signal reserved specifically for approaching outsiders of significant rank. Kane appeared moments later, striding purposefully across the grounds toward the main gate, his expression alert and cautious. Elena followed quickly behind him, her heart beginning to race with uncertain anticipation as she watched the gates open to reveal a small procession approaching from the forest tree line. Her breath caught sharply the moment she recognized the lead figure, Damien. He looked different than she remembered, she realized immediately, thinner, perhaps, and carrying himself with none of the confident authority that had once defined his presence so completely. His eyes found hers across the distance, and something like desperate hope flickered briefly across his features before he composed himself, addressing Kane directly instead. "Alpha Kane," Damien said, his voice carrying careful respect rather than his previous entitled confidence. "I request permission to speak with Elena, privately, if she's willing." Kane's expression hardened immediately, stepping slightly forward, positioning himself protectively between Damien and Elena, without appearing overly aggressive. "That decision belongs entirely to Elena," he said firmly, "not to you, and not to pack politics." Elena appreciated Kane's protective stance, though she found herself surprisingly composed as she considered Damien's unexpected arrival. Whatever pain his betrayal had once caused her, she recognized now, standing steadily beside Kane, that she no longer felt the devastating vulnerability that had once defined her relationship with her former mate. "I'll speak with him," Elena said finally, surprising both men with her calm certainty. "But not privately. Whatever Damien wishes to say, he can say here, openly." Damien's expression flickered with discomfort, clearly having hoped for a more private conversation, though he nodded slowly in acceptance of her terms. "Elena," he began, his voice carrying genuine remorse that Elena recognized as authentic rather than calculated manipulation. "I came to apologize, properly, this time. Not the empty words I offered before, but genuine acknowledgement of how completely I failed you." Elena remained silent, allowing him space to continue, though her expression revealed none of the raw vulnerability such words might have once provoked. "I destroyed something precious," Damien continued, his voice growing steadier despite the difficulty of the admission. "Our bond, your trust, your standing within the pack you served faithfully for 6 years. I chose ambition and temporary infatuation over genuine partnership, and I humiliated you publicly, rather than facing my own failures honestly." "You did," Elena agreed simply, her voice steady and clear. "And for a long time, that betrayal nearly broke me entirely." Something painful flickered across Damien's face at her words, though he remained silent, allowing her to continue. "But I survived," Elena said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I rebuilt myself, Damien. Not because of anything you offered, but because I refused to let your betrayal define the rest of my life." "I understand," Damien said quietly, I only hoped, perhaps foolishly, that acknowledging my mistakes properly might offer you some measure of closure, even if reconciliation isn't what either of us seeks any longer." Elena considered his words carefully, recognizing genuine remorse within them, though she felt no corresponding pull toward reconciliation or renewed connection. Whatever bond had once existed between them had been thoroughly severed, not simply through distance, but through the deep, irreparable damage his choices had inflicted. "I accept your apology," she said finally, her voice carrying quiet dignity rather than lingering resentment. "But Damien, I need you to understand clearly that accepting your apology doesn't mean reopening any possibility of reconciliation between us. I've built a new life here, within Shadowfang. A genuine, honest bond with someone who has never once made me question his loyalty or integrity." Damien's gaze shifted briefly toward Kane, something like reluctant acceptance settling across his features. "I understand," he said quietly. "I have no right to expect anything more from you, Elena, given everything I put you through." Marcus, who had accompanied Damien on this journey, stepped forward slightly, addressing Kane directly with evident respect. "Alpha Kane, I want you to understand that Damien's visit carries no hidden agenda beyond genuine amends. Crimson Moon has no intention of disputing Elena's new bond or her standing within your pack." Kane studied Damien carefully for a long moment before responding, his protective instincts slowly relaxing, given the sincere humility Damien's demeanor genuinely conveyed. "Elena's happiness and safety remain my primary concern," Kane said firmly. "As long as that continues being respected, I have no quarrel with Crimson Moon." Damien nodded slowly, accepting the clear boundaries being established. "That's all I ask," he said quietly. "Elena's continued happiness, wherever and however she finds it." An uncomfortable silence stretched between the small gathering before Damien spoke again, his voice carrying quiet resignation. "I should return to Crimson Moon," he said. "There's considerable work required to properly rebuild trust within my own pack, given the damage my poor judgment has caused." "That seems wise," Elena said, her tone neither warm nor hostile, simply matter of fact, given the genuine distance now existing between them. As Damien turned to depart, Elena found herself speaking again, surprising even herself with the words that emerged. "Damien," she said, causing him to pause and glance back toward her. "I hope you genuinely learn from this experience. Not simply for my sake, but for the sake of whoever eventually becomes your true, lasting bond, whenever fate chooses to offer you that opportunity again." Something profoundly grateful flickered across Damien's expression at her unexpected generosity. "Thank you, Elena," he said sincerely, "for your grace, even after everything I put you through." As Damien and Marcus departed back toward the forest tree line, Elena remained standing beside Kane, watching until they disappeared entirely from view. She felt Kane's hand find hers gently, offering silent comfort and support throughout the difficult confrontation. "Are you all right?" Kane asked softly, once they were finally alone again. Elena considered the question honestly before answering. "Surprisingly, yes," she said, genuine relief coloring her voice. "I expected that confrontation to reopen old wounds. Instead, it felt like finally closing a door I needed properly closed." Kane pulled her gently into a warm embrace, pressing a soft kiss against her forehead. "You handled that with remarkable strength," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you, Elena, truly. I couldn't have found that strength without the healing this pack, and you specifically, have offered me these past months," Elena admitted softly, resting comfortably within his protective embrace. "Whatever healing you found here," Kane said gently, "you built it yourself, Elena. I simply offered space and patience for that healing to occur naturally." Standing together within the quiet evening light, the difficult confrontation with Damien finally behind them, Elena felt a profound sense of completion settling peacefully within her chest. Whatever pain her past held, she recognized clearly now that her future, bright and genuine, belonged entirely to the new bond she had built within Shadowfang, alongside a mate who had shown her nothing but honesty, patience, and unwavering support since the very moment fate had brought them together. Drums echoed through Shadowfang's estate grounds as the entire pack gathered beneath a canopy of golden autumn leaves, anticipation buzzing palpably through the assembled crowd. Elena stood within the private preparation chamber, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from overwhelming joy, as Grace helped fasten the final details of her ceremonial gown. "You look radiant," Grace said warmly, stepping back to admire her handiwork. The gown, simple yet elegant, carried none of the ostentatious grandeur Elena's previous ceremonial attire at Crimson Moon once displayed, reflecting instead the modest, genuine warmth that defined Shadowfang's entire community. "I never expected to feel this way again," Elena admitted softly, studying her reflection carefully. "This complete, this certain. Cain has waited his entire adult life for a bond this genuine," Grace said gently. "Everyone within this pack can see how thoroughly you two belong together." A soft knock interrupted their conversation, and Marcus entered the chamber, having traveled once again from Crimson Moon, this time carrying an invitation rather than difficult news. "Elena," he said warmly, "the entire pack awaits. Cain asked me to escort you, if you're ready." Elena smiled genuinely at her old friend, grateful he had remained a constant, supportive presence throughout her entire journey, from devastating betrayal toward this joyful new beginning. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady with genuine certainty. Marcus offered his arm, and together they walked from the preparation chamber toward the ceremonial grounds, where the entire Shadowfang pack had gathered beneath the golden canopy. Elena's breath caught the moment she saw Cain waiting for her at the center of the assembled crowd, his expression carrying open, unguarded joy that few within his pack had ever witnessed from their typically reserved alpha. As she approached, the assembled wolves parted respectfully, offering warm smiles and quiet words of encouragement as she passed. These wolves, unlike the political maneuvering and hidden agendas that had ultimately poisoned her time within Crimson Moon, had welcomed her genuinely from the very beginning, valuing her contributions and character, rather than simply her position or title. Cain reached for her hands the moment she arrived before him, his sharp eyes softening completely as he studied her with open adoration. "You look absolutely beautiful," he said softly, for her ears alone amid the surrounding crowd. "Thank you," Elena replied, matching his warm smile with her own genuine joy. "I've never felt more certain of anything in my entire life." The pack elder, an elderly wolf named Victor who had served Shadowfang faithfully for decades, stepped forward to begin the ceremonial proceedings. His voice carried clearly across the gathered crowd as he spoke of the sacred nature of mate bonds, the rare gift of finding genuine partnership built on honesty, mutual respect, and unwavering loyalty. "Rarely," Victor continued, his weathered voice carrying deep wisdom accumulated over a long lifetime, "do we witness a bond forming under such unprecedented circumstances as the one we celebrate today." Elena's wolf spirit, wounded deeply by previous betrayal, recognized within Cain something genuine and true, proving that fate finds ways to offer second chances to those deserving of real happiness. Elena felt tears of genuine joy threatening as Victor's words settled meaningfully across the assembled crowd, many pack members nodding in agreement, having witnessed firsthand the careful, patient healing that had ultimately blossomed into this beautiful, unprecedented bond. "Cain," Victor continued, turning toward the Alpha, "do you accept Elena fully as your Luna, promising honesty, loyalty, and genuine partnership throughout whatever challenges your future together may hold?" "I do," Cain said, his voice carrying steady, unwavering conviction, completely and without reservation. "Elena," Victor asked, turning toward her now, "do you accept Cain fully as your mate, offering the same honesty, loyalty, and genuine partnership in return?" "I do," Elena said, her voice clear and certain, carrying none of the hesitation or lingering fear that might have once colored such an important declaration. "Completely, and with a whole, healed heart." The assembled pack erupted into joyful cheers as Cain pulled Elena gently into his arms, sealing their bond with a tender, promise-filled kiss that spoke volumes about the genuine partnership they had carefully built together over recent months. Elena felt the mate bond settling fully and completely into place, warm and steady, nothing like the whirlwind intensity of her previous connection, but something far more valuable. Steady, patient, unshakable devotion, built on genuine trust rather than simple instinct alone. As the ceremony concluded and celebrations began throughout the estate grounds, Elena found herself surrounded by genuine well-wishes from pack members who had watched her transformation from a broken, exiled wolf into a woman finally embracing complete happiness and belonging. Grace embraced her warmly, tears of genuine joy visible in her kind eyes. Marcus offered heartfelt congratulations, promising to maintain their friendship regardless of the distance now separating their respective pack territories. Later that evening, as celebrations continued joyfully around them, Cain found a quiet moment to pull Elena aside, leading her toward the same peaceful pond where their relationship had first blossomed months earlier. Moonlight rippled gently across the water's calm surface, mirroring the same peaceful evening when they had first openly acknowledged their growing feelings for one another. "Do you remember?" Cain asked softly, wrapping his arms gently around her waist as they stood together beside the water. "The night I found you injured in the forest, certain you were nothing more than an unwelcome trespasser upon my territory?" Elena laughed softly, leaning comfortably into his warm embrace. "I remember thinking you were the most intimidating wolf I'd ever encountered," she admitted, with genuine amusement. "And now?" Cain asked, pressing a gentle kiss against her temple. "Now," Elena said, turning within his arms to meet his gaze directly. "I recognize that meeting as the moment fate finally offered me the genuine happiness I deserved all along." Cain's expression softened completely, genuine love and devotion shining clearly within his sharp eyes. "I promise you, Elena," he said softly, "for as long as we both live, you will never again experience the betrayal and heartbreak your previous bond inflicted upon you. This connection between us, our partnership, our pack, will be built entirely on honesty and unwavering loyalty." "I believe you completely," Elena said, her voice carrying genuine certainty earned through months of careful, patient healing and genuine partnership. "And I promise the very same devotion in return." As they stood together beneath the peaceful moonlight, surrounded by the modest, genuine community that had welcomed her so completely, Elena reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. From devastating betrayal and public humiliation within Crimson Moon, through painful exile and uncertain wandering, toward unexpected healing and genuine partnership within Shadowfang's welcoming embrace, her wolf spirit, once wounded so severely by Damien's careless betrayal, now felt completely whole again, settled peacefully into the steady, unwavering bond she shared with Cain. Whatever challenges the future might hold, Elena faced them now with genuine confidence and hard-earned wisdom, understanding fully that true partnership required honesty, patience, and unwavering mutual respect, rather than simple instinct or fleeting infatuation alone. As the celebration continued joyfully behind them, Cain took her hand gently within his own, leading her back toward the gathered pack that had become her true family. Together, they walked forward into their shared future, as Alpha and Luna of Shadowfang, bound not merely by fate's initial recognition, but by genuine love, hard-won trust, and the unshakable devotion that came from choosing each other completely, every single day, regardless of whatever challenges life might eventually bring their way. Elena had lost everything once, betrayed by someone she trusted completely. Yet through that devastating loss, she had ultimately discovered something far more valuable. Genuine, unwavering love with someone who cherished her completely, exactly as she was, without hidden agendas or careless betrayal, ever threatening the foundation of trust they had so carefully built together. Her story, once defined entirely by heartbreak and betrayal, had transformed completely into a story of resilience, healing, and the profound, unexpected joy of finding true partnership exactly when she needed it most.